turning one left, long going.
One left, all moon on 809.
Tower Tennessee 5107 Heavy 289. 8901 Heavy, runway 28 left, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, 28 left, 901.
Departure 9901 Heavy out of 1,000 to 3,000.
901 Heavy, North Tower departure, you're under contact, maintain 4,000, 6 speed, your discretion.
4,000 hour speed discretion, United 901 Heavy, thanks.
990, direct Orca.
That's level 190, direct to work, RP990, 1 heavy.
United 901 Heavy, climbing to 19,000 current.
That's level 190, United 901 Heavy, roger.
Standing United 901 Heavy, stand by, give me another fix.
Roger, we're out of 10.
United 901 Heavy, direct Mustang, Foxtrot, Mike Golf.
Mustang United 901.